Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 8 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's very strong selection of GT class, generally production based race cars. And in this particular episode we're featuring a car which on the surface of things, and for the majority of the time in practice, is a very strong candidate for being one of the best all-round GT class race cars in the game. And it was also the hero car, as it were, of the 2014 GT Academy. It is the 2013 Nissan GT-R Team Nismo RJN. What a name! And what a car. It has a strong spec, as we said. It looks pretty good. I personally love the colour combination of red and white, and it has the spec that you would expect from an R35 based vehicle. The R35 is a fantastic performance car, and it makes fantastic racing variants. Now, in its fully tuned form, the 3.8 litre engine in this car puts out 981 horsepower, which interestingly enough is actually not the most powerful of GTR race cars. The Team Schulz Motorsport actually is the most powerful of the real GTR race cars that are featured on the game. But this car still is no slouch with 981 horsepower. It also puts out 790 pound-feet of torque. Now, it's a GT3 spec machine, and it weighs in at 1,350 kilos. So, not the lightest of racing cars, and of course you can't make it any lighter because it's a race car. So as far as weight, it's not the best. It's not as heavy as something like a Lister Storm, but it's still heavier than many of the other GT class machines, especially if you're comparing it to something like a McLaren F1 race car. Now, as far as horsepower per tonne, it still puts out a respectable 727 thanks to that huge power. And the PP is extremely high on this car, 683. The price is perhaps the best thing about this car, 350,000 credits. That's a very, very good price. Usually you'd expect it to cost at least 1 million credits on top of that. So 350 grand for a GTR of any racing specification is a pretty good deal, surely. Well, to some extent, yes. In a straight line, as you'd expect from a GTR, it is extremely rapid. With 981 horsepower, the acceleration can outpace many of the other GT class machines, and the top speed can be around 260 or even more on Special Stage Route X, which again makes it extremely strong for a GT class machine. However, this car, and also the silver version of the GT3 spec machine, suffer from an issue with the handling. And it's an unfortunate issue. It's the same issue, funnily enough, that the Bugatti Veyron suffers from. High-speed stiffness. Because for no apparent reason, once you get up to speeds of about, say, 180 or more in this car, regardless of your suspension settings and regardless of your downforce, the front end experiences a very strange amount of lift. And it causes that high-speed handling to become extremely heavy. Almost undrivably heavy. The result is that you have to actually brake on corners which other race cars of the GT class can take at full throttle. And that's a big disadvantage. Now, if you've never experienced that, I would recommend fully tuning this car and taking it around the track. Now, I'm not sure if it's something that only happens when it's fully tuned, because obviously it can get to those speeds much easier when you're putting out close to 1,000 horsepower. And when it was in the Academy, we never really experienced that issue because the car was running much less power. So maybe it's just something that occurs with tuning. But if you're going up against other GT class cars, many of them will probably be tuned. So that's just something that is going to happen on certain tracks. The worst track, and the track where I first noticed it as being an issue, was actually Special Stage Route X. I was preparing to do a top speed tune for this car, and it just wouldn't turn, basically. It would not take the corner. It's actually the worst handling GT class car I've ever taken around Special Stage Route X. Now, on tracks such as the Nürburgring Ring, you rarely get above, say, 180 for the majority of the track, so it's not really as much of an issue. But there is a secondary issue, and that is the size of the car. Now, with most GTRs, you don't really notice just how big the vehicle is, because the GTR is called Godzilla for a reason. It's a big car. With this car, you notice how big the vehicle is, and I'm not saying that that makes it overly heavy or has overly heavy steering, but the sheer size of the car means that it naturally takes up more of the road, and although you could think that's an advantage because people can't get past you, it also works to your disadvantage because the bigger you are, the harder it is to hold a racing line. And that unfortunately does come into play on this car more so than with other GTs. But if you're looking purely for value, a high bang for buck ratio, then this car's good. Other than that, it's not the best offering of GTR that you can get on the game, unfortunately. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.